Kings of the Wyld, Nicholas Eames. This is comic, quest-shaped fantasy about an aging mercenary band getting pulled back toward one more impossible job. For RPG fans, the useful question is not only whether a book has monsters, magic, taverns, and travel, the real question is whether it understands the feeling of a party. A good RPG-adjacent book gives you readable roles. Someone carries the plan, someone causes the problem, someone talks too much, someone can survive the bad decision. This guide uses that lens. We are not ranking literary greatness. We are matching books to the kind of campaign feeling you might already love from D&D, JRPGs, action RPGs, or story-heavy games. Kings of the Wyld is the easiest place to explain that because it treats the group as the engine. The jokes, the loyalty, the tired bodies, and the old reputations all work together. It feels like a campaign where everyone knows the map is dangerous, but the table keeps going because the party chemistry is the real reward. That is why this list favors usable entry points over encyclopedic coverage. Each book here gives a different version of the same promise. It helps a reader feel the table rhythm on the page, then decide which style of adventure is worth continuing. Kings of the Wyld, Nicholas Eames. This is fast, warm, and openly built around the pleasure of getting the old group back together for one more fantasy road trip. If your RPG taste is party banter, class-like roles, impossible travel, and the sense that every member brings a different kind of trouble, this is probably the safest first pick. It is not a rulebook in novel form. It is more like the emotional memory of a great table. The book understands why groups are funny even when the situation is serious. It also understands why a party is more than a list of abilities. For a beginner, that matters. You can enjoy the adventure without needing a glossary or a long study period. The tone is accessible, but not empty. The humor sits beside fatigue, friendship, and the cost of trying to be heroic after the easy years are gone. Start here if you want the book that most directly says, yes, this is the feeling of a fantasy party moving through a world that keeps throwing encounters at them. Another reason it works well as a first buy is the low explanation burden. You do not need to understand decades of lore before the fun begins. The book gives you tone, group purpose, and emotional stakes quickly, then lets the party carry the weight. The Blacktongue Thief, Christopher Buehlman. This is sharp-edged fantasy with a thief narrator. Dangerous roads, strange magic, and a voice that feels like it has survived bad contracts. This is the pick for readers who like rogues, improvised plans, grim jokes, and quests that feel less polished than a clean, heroic campaign. The appeal is not comfort. The appeal is texture. The world feels worn. The humor is dry. The danger feels close enough that every shortcut has a cost. For RPG fans, it has that satisfying sense of inventory, curses, odd companions, and local problems that keep turning into larger problems. It is also a good choice when you want fantasy that feels adult without becoming slow. The book moves with a practical, road-level rhythm. You learn the world through need, debt, travel, and negotiation rather than long lectures. Choose this if your favorite table character is the one who checks the locks, doubts the noble quest, and still walks into the mess because the job has already begun. It also has a strong sense of voice. That matters for RPG readers, because a memorable narrator can feel like sitting beside a player who knows exactly how their character talks, lies, complains, and survives. The personality becomes part of the equipment. The Lies of Lamora, Scott Lynch. This is city fantasy about a crew, a con game rhythm, and the pleasure of watching clever people build plans inside a dangerous social maze. For RPG fans, the fit is obvious if you enjoy stealth sessions, persuasion checks, fake identities, rich locations, and groups that survive because they know each other well. It is not the book to choose if you want a classic open-road quest right away. It is better for readers who like the party to feel like a specialized crew. The fantasy element is present, but the real hook is competence under pressure. The city feels like a campaign hub with factions, rotes, money, secrets, and reputations. That makes it a strong bridge for players who love roleplay as much as combat. Start here if your ideal session involves planning, improvising, lying convincingly, and watching a group turn personality into strategy. It rewards attention, but it stays readable because the crew dynamic gives every scene a clear social charge. It is also a useful pick for readers who think they only like games, not fantasy novels. The book turns social movement into forward motion. Every deal, disguise, and risk feels like a meaningful choice rather than background decoration. Mistborn, The Final Empire, Brandon Sanderson. This is structured epic fantasy with clear magical rules, strong momentum, and a team built around different capabilities. If your RPG brain likes builds, systems, resources, upgrades, and the feeling that power has costs and limits, this is the most mechanical pick on the list. The book is often recommended to fantasy beginners because its rules are easy to grasp without feeling small. It gives the reader a satisfying sense of what can be done, what cannot be done, and why preparation matters. That is very close to the pleasure of a good game system. The party dynamic is also important. The group works because each person contributes a different function, and that makes the larger plan easier to follow. Choose this if you like fantasy where the magic feels readable, where action has logic behind it, and where the story gives you enough structure to understand why a decision works without spoiling the mystery of the world. This is why it often converts well from games to books. The reader can feel progress. New information changes what earlier scenes meant. Abilities are not vague decoration, they are tools with limits, and limits are what make strategy satisfying. Stormfront, Jim Butcher. This is urban fantasy with a private investigator structure, modern city problems, and magic treated as something practical rather than distant. For RPG fans, it fits a different table style. It is less about a full party crossing a world, and more about a campaign built from cases, contacts, favors, rules, and recurring complications. That makes it useful for readers who enjoy episodic adventures. You can feel the session shape clearly. A problem arrives. The lead follows clues. The magical rules create limits. The city becomes a map of risks and resources. This is also a good pick for someone who wants fantasy without leaving the modern world behind. The tone is direct and fast, with a pulpy edge that makes it easy to keep reading. Choose this if your favorite games are investigation-heavy, urban or mission-based. It is a strong starter when you want magic, danger, and momentum without committing to a giant invented setting immediately. Because it is the first book in the Dresden Files, it also gives a simple long-term path if the style works for you. Read one case first, then decide whether you want the wider series, rather than treating the whole shelf as one commitment. The Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. This is lyrical fantasy about talent, reputation, learning, music, and the way a life can become larger in the telling. For RPG fans, it does not feel like the most traditional party adventure. It feels closer to building one remarkable character sheet over time. The pleasure is in skills, study, hunger, mistakes, and the slow accumulation of ability. Readers who enjoy bards, mages, academy settings, and character-driven progression often connect with it quickly. The important caveat is simple. This series is not complete, so it is best approached for the experience of the first book rather than as a guaranteed finished road. That does not make it useless. It just changes the recommendation. Choose this if you love the role-playing side of fantasy, especially identity, voice, training, reputation, and the feeling of watching a character become capable. Avoid starting here if unfinished series make it harder for you to relax into a book. The reading experience is slower and more reflective than the most action-driven picks here. That can be a strength when you want atmosphere and voice. It can be a mismatch when you want party tactics every chapter. Know that before choosing it. Pawn of Prophecy, David Eddings. This is classic quest fantasy with a clear journey, approachable prose, and a familiar sense of a young life widening into a much bigger world. For RPG fans, the appeal is not novelty, the appeal is clean structure. It has the feeling of an early JRPG where the road opens gradually. Companions matter, and the reader is allowed to learn the world in manageable steps. That makes it useful for beginners who want comfort instead of density. It is also a reminder that familiar fantasy can still be valuable when the execution is easy to follow. You do not need to fight the book to understand the direction. You can settle into the adventure and let the party shape become clearer as the journey grows. Choose this if you want a more traditional starter, especially if your favorite RPG experiences are built around a clear main path, a growing group, and the pleasure of watching the world expand one region at a time. This is also the pick for readers who want fantasy to feel friendly at the sentence level. The style is direct, the direction is clear, the book asks for patience with older conventions, but it gives back comfort and steady forward motion. Magician, Apprentice, Raymond E. Feist. This is classic epic fantasy with a coming-of-age entry point, a widening world, and the feeling of a campaign that begins locally before the map gets much larger. RPG fans often respond to this kind of structure because it feels like a long-running table where early choices open into bigger histories, bigger stakes, and more complicated factions. The book is not trying to be a modern grim fantasy. Its value is in old-school momentum and a sense of expansion. It gives you the pleasure of starting with a readable doorway and then realizing the world has more doors behind it. That is very close to how many great campaigns feel. Choose this if you like fantasy that begins with a clear entry point and then grows outward. It is especially good for readers who want a more traditional path than a heist, a city case, or a single rogue-voiced road adventure. It also works well if you want a gateway into older epic fantasy without beginning with the densest possible option. The first step feels readable, the larger promise remains visible. That balance is useful for RPG fans who want campaign scale without immediate overload. Kings of the Wyld, the Blacktongue Thief, and the Lies of Locke Lamora sit closer to the D&D side of this guide because they foreground table energy. You feel roles, banter, improvisation, and problem-solving inside a group. They are not identical. Kings of the Wyld is the warmest party adventure. The Blacktongue Thief is sharper and more road-worn. The Lies of Locke Lamora is the best fit for crew planning and social play. Pawn of Prophecy and Magician, Apprentice sit closer to the JRPG side because they use cleaner quest movement and a stronger sense of the world opening in stages. That distinction helps beginners choose without overthinking. If you want the feeling of a table arguing its way through danger, start in the D&D lane. If you want a clearer arc, a growing map, and classic adventure momentum, start in the JRPG lane. Neither lane is better. They simply scratch different reader instincts. A useful shortcut is to imagine your favorite session type: tavern reunion, risky contract, and messy crew planning point toward the D&D lane. World map, companion growth, and classic quest escalation point toward the JRPG lane. That one distinction prevents most wrong first picks. Mistborn, the Final Empire, Kings of the Wyld, and the Blacktongue Thief make the strongest opening trio because they show 3 different versions of RPG-friendly fantasy. One gives you systems and builds, one gives you party warmth, one gives you rogue road texture. After that, use taste rather than obligation. If you want crew play, move to the Lies of Locke Lamora. If you want urban missions, try Stormfront. If you want character growth and beautiful narration, try The Name of the Wind, while remembering the unfinished series caveat. If you want classic JRPG-style progression, try Pawn of Prophecy or Magician Apprentice. This order is designed for buying and reading in stages. Do not collect everything first. Pick one lane, read one book, and let the next choice come from what you enjoyed. That keeps the process useful, affordable, and low pressure. It also matches the channel goal. The point is not to own a perfect shelf. The point is to find your next good read. This staged approach also helps with affiliate-friendly descriptions later. The book list can be clear without sounding pushy. Viewers can choose paperback, hardcover, Kindle, or audio for the one book that fits them now, then return when they are ready for the next lane. Kings of the Wyld, Nicholas Eames. This is the broadest recommendation for RPG fans because it captures the party feeling quickly and with very little setup pressure. If you want one clean answer, start there. If you care more about game systems and readable magic rules, start with Mistborn: The Final Empire. If you want rogue energy and a rougher road, start with The Blacktongue Thief. If you want a crew story, choose The Lies of Locke Lamora. If you want urban case fantasy, choose Stormfront. If you want a lyrical character-focused experience, choose The Name of the Wind. If you want the most classic JRPG-style route, choose Pawn of Prophecy or Magician Apprentice. The safest buying rule is simple. Do not buy all 8 at once unless you already know this lane is yours. Pick the book that matches the kind of RPG night you miss most. Party banter, clever planning, magic systems, urban cases, or classic questing. That one choice is enough to begin. The full guide on the channel can sit beside this list as a reusable decision map. Come back to it when your taste changes. A reader who starts with party comedy today might want systems fantasy next month and classic quest fantasy after that.